For your ears only for the week of November 18th and Thanksgiving, I'm David Alpern.
I'm Melissa Axelberth.
When it comes to the top 2%, what I'm not going to do is to extend further a tax cut for folks who don't need it, which would cost close to $1 trillion. And it's very difficult to see how you make up that $1 trillion, if we're serious about deficit reduction, just by closing loopholes and deductions. The math tends not to work.
What the president's campaign did was focus on certain members of his base coalition, give them extraordinary financial gifts from the government, and then work very aggressively to turn them out to vote.
Susan Rice should have known better, and if she didn't know better, she's not qualified. She should have known better. I will do everything in my power to block her from being the United States Secretary of State.
A re-elected President Obama was back at work last week confronting the fiscal cliff and restating his demand for more taxes from the wealthiest Americans as essential to any compromise on spending cuts. Defeated Republican challenger Mitt Romney also was repeating himself, specifically echoing the earlier secretly taped sentiment that Obama's appeal was based on federal favors to key voting groups, women, minorities, young people, which drew sharp criticism from other GOP leaders eager to win over those groups, not insult them.
Republican Senator John McCain, meanwhile, kept up his campaign against the possible nomination of UN Ambassador Susan Rice to be Secretary of State. He cited her misleading explanation of the Benghazi consulate attack that killed the U.S. ambassador and 3 other Americans last September 11th, though new testimony from resigned CIA Chief David Petraeus, albeit shadowed by an adultery scandal, seemed to shift the blame elsewhere. To tie together all these strands and more, for your ears only, we're joined again by veteran TV commentator Eleanor Clift, also a contributor at NewsweekDailyBeast.com. Welcome back to the program, Eleanor.
Glad to be with you. Hi.
Hi. Do you see a compromise in the works on more taxes from the rich by higher rates and or lower deductions?
Well, I think all the major players are sounding very accommodating. So I do think their intentions at this point are to forge a deal along the lines that you mentioned. But each side is going to have to confront the interest groups. In fact, the liberal interest groups, some of them labor leaders, were at the White House this week, and they're feeling pretty good after a winning presidential election and adding 2 more Senate seats. And so they don't want the president to give in too much on shaving entitlements. And the president, I think, entering a second term, really can't afford to back down on his campaign pledge that the rich have to pay more. And Republicans are going to have to climb down from their no new taxes pledge, which has been a very powerful underpinning of the party for some time. So it's going to be fascinating to see how they do it. But the betting right now is that they'll probably pull something off before the end of the year.
What role in the process do you see for Romney's defeated running mate Paul Ryan, the Republican House budget master? Does he benefit from aiding a compromise or standing on principles favored by the party's conservative base?
I think Paul Ryan is in a very tricky position because if he compromises, he really confronts the base of people who have looked to him as rallying the flag for the small government, no new taxes wing of the party. If he doesn't compromise, then he will have difficulty being seen as somebody who could win a national election. He could, win among conservatives, but that's not enough to win the presidency. So I'm not really sure where he's going to come out, but he carries a lot of weight because if the Speaker of the House can get Paul Ryan on his side, Ryan can bring along a lot of votes. So he's the man to watch.
On the Democratic side, how do you see the House and Senate leadership getting party support for painful cuts in entitlements and other spending if the rich do end up paying more one way or another?
Well, I think Harry Reid will do pretty well on the Democratic side. And Mitch McConnell, I think, is on the Republican side, is also looking at the handwriting on the wall. And I think Nancy Pelosi, who's now staying on as the minority leader in the House, she's another figure who, if she's quite a strong liberal, and if she goes along with the deal, she can probably bring along enough votes in her caucus. And so getting the leaders on board, even Speaker Boehner has said, don't worry about my caucus, they'll come along this time. Well, we'll see, but I think each of these leaders will have a strong selling job to do to put together the votes, and it's going to have to be both parties. And I think the president said it, will we hold hands and do this together? Because I think each party is going to take some blame from their constituents.
We'll talk more about Petraeus later in the show, but do you think he could have resisted resignation from the CIA once his affair became part of the FBI investigation of anonymous emails from the biographer who had become his lover? Are the people you talk to around Washington more angry that he had this affair and jeopardized his career, or that the FBI pursued those anonymous emails and ended up finding out about it and inevitably making it part of the official record?
Well, I think initially people were looking at the FBI and thinking that the FBI had overstepped. But the more we know about it, the FBI really did everything pretty much by the book. And Petraeus initially, according to reports, resisted resigning. But when it became clear to him that his affair would become public, I think he did what any military man might do. I mean, he leads an organization, really, when he was in the military that has the military code of honor. And now he's at the CIA, and you can't have, if you're having an affair, you're subject to blackmail. You can't have a different rule for the guy at the top and a different rule for everybody else.
Of course, since it was known, he wouldn't be subject to blackmail anymore. I mean, it had become part of the record, but could he have existed in that position with everybody knowing about it?
Yes, I mean, the blackmail would be over, but he himself would have to go before the public and his wife and everybody, knowing that he had behaved in a way that violated his own code of honor and his own military code of honor. I mean, I think he's going to do just fine. I think he did the honorable thing in resigning. And according to the New York Times, he's got his eye on the presidency of Princeton. So his career, I think we're going to hear more from David Petraeus.
What do you make of McCain's persistent opposition to Susan Rice, despite closed-door congressional testimony by Petraeus last week, shifting blame for misleading administration reports on Benghazi away from her? Some see an effort to have Massachusetts Senator John Kerry named Secretary of State, opening his Senate seat to another run by Scott Brown, who just lost his Senate seat to Elizabeth Warren. Is that just too Machiavellian?
Well, there are lots of layers to John McCain, and I think one of them might be that he would like to see his friend, John Kerry, and the two of them have bonded over their Vietnam experiences, Secretary of State. I also think Senator McCain has never really gotten over his loss to President Obama. And lastly, he probably is motivated by some, genuine questions over how Benghazi unfolded. And it's going to be fascinating to see if the president goes ahead and does nominate her, because it would be a major fight. I think it's a fight he could probably win, but does he want to spend political capital on that? And McCain, by being so forceful against Rice, in a way, kind of upped the ante for the president, because if he doesn't nominate her, he looks like he's walking away from the fight, and you don't want to do that at the start of a second term when you're trying to show that you've earned political clout and that you're willing to use it.
Thank you, Eleanor. Veteran TV commentator Eleanor Clift is also a contributor at NewsweekDailyBeast.com.
Quote from the news, a clear message to those who would engage in this kind of reckless and wanton conduct. That was Attorney General Eric Holder on a settlement with energy giant BP for its disastrous Gulf of Mexico oil spill, including $4.5 billion with a B in penalties, 14 criminal guilty pleas, and additional criminal charges against 3 BP employees. A day later, another Gulf oil rig exploded, leaving 11 workers injured and 2 missing.
Next, general confusion, adultery, Benghazi, Gaza for your ears only.